Days turned into weeks, and the world felt like it was falling apart. The alien invasion had pushed humanity to its limits. Cities lay in ruins, highways were clogged with refugees, and the air smelled of smoke and fear. In Washington, D.C., Ryan Carter sat in the dimly lit war room, staring at a map covered in red markers. Each marker represented another Lawson, another town, city, or military base that had fallen to the invaders. The GDI's efforts were failing, and morale was crumbling. Dr. Emily Ross worked tirelessly in her lab, surrounded by wires, circuits, and glowing monitors. Her hands moved quickly as she fine-tuned the EMP weapon, her mind racing faster than ever before. She knew the stakes. If the device didn't work, humanity might not survive another wave of attacks. But the pressure from government officials was relentless. They wanted results now, not days from now. "We're running out of time," General Monroe said during one of their briefings. Her voice was calm, but her eyes betrayed her frustration. "Every hour we wait, more people die." Ryan nodded, though he couldn't shake the guilt gnawing at him. He had sent soldiers into battles they couldn't win, knowing full well the odds were stacked against them. He tried to remind himself that it wasn't his fault. They were fighting an enemy far beyond their understanding, but it didn't make the weight on his shoulders any lighter. Back in Kansas, Jake Miller and the militia struggled to hold their ground. After destroying the alien drone, they thought they'd earned a small victory, but the aliens weren't deterred. More ships arrived, and the attacks grew worse. The townsfolk who hadn't fled yet lived in constant fear, hiding in basements and abandoned buildings. Supplies were running low, and hope was fading fast. One night, Jake stood guard outside the church hall, where most of the remaining townspeople had taken shelter. The fields around them were eerily quiet, bathed in pale moonlight. Max, his loyal dog, sat beside him, ears perked for any sign of danger. Jake's thoughts drifted to Linda. She had begged him to leave with her when the evacuation orders came, but he refused. Now, he wondered if he'd made the right choice. Was staying worth it if it meant losing everything? Suddenly, Max growled, snapping Jake out of his thoughts. In the distance, a faint hum grew louder. Jake gripped his rifle tightly, scanning the horizon. A group of alien drones emerged from the darkness, their glowing lights cutting through the night like search beams. Behind them, larger figures moved alien ground troops, tall and insect-like, their movements jerky, yet precise. "Here they come," Jake shouted, waking the others. The militia scrambled to take positions, but they all knew they were outnumbered. This time, there would be no holding back. The battle was fierce and chaotic. Bullets ricocheted off the aliens' armor, and energy blasts tore through walls and trees. Jake fought alongside his neighbors, each shot fired, fueled by desperation. People fell around him, some wounded, others dead. Through the smoke and chaos, Jake spotted something strange, a cluster of alien machines, dragging captives toward their ship. His stomach churned as he realized what was happening. The aliens weren't just attacking, they were taking prisoners. Without thinking, Jake broke away from the fight and ran toward the captives. He recognized one of them. It was Linda. Her face was streaked with dirt, and her hands were bound, but she was alive. Jake's heart raced as he aimed his rifle at the nearest machine, firing until it collapsed. He grabbed Linda and pulled her to safety, shielding her body with his own. When the dust settled, the aliens retreated, leaving behind destruction and despair. Jake held Linda close, tears streaming down his face. She clung to him, trembling but unharmed. For a moment, they allowed themselves to feel relief, but it didn't last long. As dawn broke, Jake looked out over the wreckage of their town. Homes were reduced to rubble, crops burned to ash, and bodies lined the streets. The survivors gathered in silence, too exhausted to speak. Jake knew they couldn't stay here much longer. The aliens would return, and next time, they might not be so Lucky Dot in Washington, D.C. Ryan stared at the latest casualty reports, his jaw clenched. The EMP weapon was almost ready, but would it be enough? Emily warned him that even if it worked, it wouldn't end the war, it would only buy them time. Time to do what? No one had an answer. The aliens had shown humanity how powerless it truly was, and yet, amidst the fear and loss, a spark of defiance remained. Jake, Ryan, and countless others refused to give up. They didn't know how to win, but they knew one thing for certain: Earth had to fight back. Jack Ryan wiped the grease from his hands onto a rag that was already too dirty to tell its original color. The air in the repair bay smelled of oil and burnt metal, a scent he had grown used to over the years. Haven 7 wasn't much a mining colony on the edge of nowhere, but it was home. Or at least, as close to home as Jack could claim these days. The Keleth made sure of that. The Keleth were everywhere. Their sleek black ships loomed like shadows in the sky, a constant reminder of who held the power. They didn't speak often, preferring to let their weapons do the talking when necessary. But everyone knew their rules. Work hard, stay quiet, and don't think about fighting back. To them, humans weren't people, they were tools, resources, to be exploited until there was nothing left. Jack glanced up through the open bay door. A group of miners trudged by, their faces etched with exhaustion. Most of them avoided looking at the Keleth overseer standing nearby, his armor glinting under the dim sunlight. Jack hated seeing that look, the resignation in their eyes, the way they carried themselves like prisoners rather than free beings. He clenched his fists, but forced himself to relax. Anger wouldn't help anyone here. "Hey, Jack," a voice called out, breaking him from his thoughts. It was Daniel Carter, one of the few people Jack still trusted. Daniel leaned against the doorway, his lanky frame silhouetted by the light behind him. "Got a minute?" "Sure," Jack said, tossing the rag onto the table. "What's up?" Daniel stepped inside, lowering his voice. "There's someone asking around about you. Says she wants to talk." "About me?" Jack raised an eyebrow. "Who is she?" "She calls herself Emily Dawson. New face around here, and she's got a story you might want to hear." Jack hesitated. Strangers weren't common on Havens, and those who showed up usually brought trouble. Still, curiosity got the better of him. "All right, where is she?" Daniel jerked his thumb toward the cantina down the street. "She's waiting there. Just be careful, all right? Something about her feels different." Jack nodded and grabbed his jacket before heading out. The cantina was half empty, as usual, filled with the low hum of conversations and the occasional clink of glasses. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on her. Emily Dawson sat alone at a corner table, nursing a drink. She looked younger than he expected, maybe late 20s, with sharp features and dark hair tied back into a ponytail. Her clothes were practical, not fancy, but clean enough to suggest she hadn't been on Haven 7 for long. "You're Jack?" she asked, as he approached, her tone direct, but not unfriendly. "That's right," he replied, pulling out a chair. "What do you want?" Emily leaned forward, her expression serious. "I need your help. Not just yours, humanity's. We've been living under the Keleth's boot for too long, and it's time we did something about it." Jack frowned. "And what exactly are you proposing?" "There's a resistance," she said simply. "A network of colonies working together to take back what's ours. But we can't do it without people like you. People who know how to fight, how to survive." Jack stared at her, weighing her words. Resistance. It sounded impossible, suicidal. Even yet, deep down, a small spark ignited within him. For years, he'd told himself to keep his head down, to avoid trouble. But maybe, just maybe, there was another way. "What makes you think I'm the guy for this?" he asked finally. Emily smiled faintly. "Because you haven't given up yet. And because if we don't try, then what's the point of surviving at all?" Jack didn't answer right away. Outside, the Kelith ship drifted silently across the horizon, casting its shadow over the colony once more. Jack spent the rest of the evening listening to Emily's plan. She spoke quietly, but with a fire in her eyes that made it hard to look away. The Kelith, she explained, relied heavily on gravity crystals mined from planets like Haven 7. These crystals powered their ships, weapons, and even their massive orbital stations. If they could disrupt the supply lines, it would weaken the Empire enough to give humanity a fighting chance. It's not just about stopping shipments, Emily said, leaning back in her chair. It's about sending a message, letting them know we're not going to roll over anymore. Jack rubbed his temples, trying to process everything. It sounded dangerous, suicidal, even, but there was something about Emily's determination that made him hesitate. He had spent years telling himself to stay out of trouble, to keep his head down and survive. But survival felt hollow when every day was the same, working under the Kelith's watchful gaze, watching others break under the weight of oppression. "What do you need from me?" he asked finally. Emily's lips curled into a faint smile. "You're smart, Jack. You know how things work here better than most, and you've got connections. We need people who can help us move quickly, think on their feet. People like you." Jack sighed, glancing around the cantina. A few miners sat at the bar, laughing nervously, as if trying to forget their troubles for a moment. Outside, the Kelith overseers patrolled the streets, their armored forms casting long shadows in the dim light. He knew what Emily was asking wasn't just risky, it was insane. But maybe insanity was exactly what they needed. "All right," he said after a pause. "I'll help, but I'm not doing this alone." Emily nodded. "Good. Start thinking about who else might be willing to join us. We'll need more than just 2 people if we're going to pull this off." Over the next few days, Jack reached out to a handful of people he trusted. First was Daniel Carter, the pilot who had introduced him to Emily. Daniel was hesitant at first, his voice low and cautious as they spoke in private. "You sure about this, Jack? If the Kelith find out." "They won't," Jack interrupted. "Not if we're careful. Look, I know it's risky, but don't you ever get tired of living like this? Of being afraid all the time?" Daniel stared at him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "All right, count me in." Next came Maria Lopez, a brilliant engineer who had patched up more busted machinery than anyone else on Haven 7. Maria was skeptical at first, crossing her arms and raising an eyebrow when Jack explained the plan. "You're talking about taking on the Kelith. With what, exactly?" "Scrap metal and duct tape." "We've got brains," Jack replied, "and guts. That's a start, isn't it?" Maria laughed despite herself. "Fine. But if we're doing this, we're doing it my way. No shortcuts." Finally, there was Sam Brooks, a young man barely out of his teens. Sam was hot-headed and eager to prove himself, traits that worried Jack but also made him useful. When Jack approached him, Sam didn't hesitate. "About time someone did something," he said, grinning. "Let's hit M where it hurts." With a small team assembled, they began planning their first operation. Emily provided maps of Kelith patrol routes and schedules, stolen from a contact in another colony. Maria worked tirelessly to modify old mining equipment into makeshift weapons, while Daniel scouted potential targets. Jack coordinated everything, keeping everyone focused and reminding them why they were doing this. As the days passed, the weight of what they were about to attempt settled over them. None of them were soldiers or heroes, they were just ordinary people pushed to their limits. But sometimes, ordinary people could do extraordinary things, and maybe, just maybe, they could strike the first blow in humanity's fight for freedom. The night of the operation was cold and quiet, the kind of silence that made Jack's skin crawl. The team gathered in an abandoned warehouse on the edge of Haven 7, far from prying eyes. Maria had spent hours rigging up a device she called a gravity scrambler, a clunky contraption built from spare parts, scavenged from old mining equipment. It wasn't pretty, but if it worked, it would temporarily disable the Kelith ship's gravity systems, leaving it vulnerable. This better work, Sam muttered, pacing back and forth. His hands were clenched into fists, his excitement barely contained. If we screw this up, we won't, Jack interrupted firmly. He glanced at each member of the team, meeting their eyes one by one. We've planned this down too. The second, stick to the plan, and we'll be fine. Emily stood near the doorway, her arms crossed as she watched the group. She hadn't said much since they arrived, but her presence was enough to steady Jack's nerves. Whatever doubts he had about her before were gone now. She believed in this fight, and that belief was contagious. Maria finished her final checks on the scrambler and gave a thumbs up, ready to go. Just remember, once I hit the switch, we've got maybe 5 minutes before they override it. 5 minutes is all we need, Daniel said, adjusting the straps on his backpack. Inside were tools for hacking into the ship's systems, tools he'd cobbled together using outdated human tech. Let's move. They slipped out of the warehouse and headed toward the landing zone, sticking to the shadows. The Kelith transport ship loomed ahead, its sleek black surface reflecting the faint light of the moon. 2 guards patrolled the area, their movements mechanical and precise. Jack signaled for Sam and Emily to circle around and create a distraction while he, Maria, and Daniel approached from the other side. "Hey, ugly!" Sam shouted suddenly, throwing a rock at one of the guards. The sound echoed through the stillness, drawing both guards' attention. They turned toward Sam and Emily, who took off running, leading them away from the ship. "Now," Jack whispered urgently. Maria activated the scrambler, and a low hum filled the air. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a loud crackle, the ship's gravity systems failed. Its landing struts collapsed slightly, tilting the vessel to one side. Alarms blared, red lights flashing across its hull. "Go," Jack urged, sprinting toward the ship with Daniel close behind. They reached the cargo bay doors, just as Maria caught up. Daniel pulled out his tools and began working on the lock, his fingers moving quickly, despite the tension. The alarms grew louder, and Jack could hear shouts in the distance as more Kelith reinforcements arrived. "Hurry up," Maria hissed, keeping watch. "I'm trying," Daniel snapped back, sweat dripping down his face. Finally, the door slid open with a hiss, revealing rows of crates filled with gravity crystals. Jack grabbed a scanner from his pocket and started scanning the crates, searching for the ones marked with specific symbols Emily had told them to look for. "There," he said, pointing to a cluster of crates near the back. "Load those into the bags." As they worked, the sound of footsteps echoed outside. The Kelith were closing in. Jack's heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to stay focused. One wrong move, and they were dead. Suddenly, a loud crash came from the other side of the ship. Sam burst into the cargo bay, breathing hard. "They're coming. We gotta go." Jack hesitated, glancing at the last crate. There wasn't time to grab it. "Forget it. Let's move." They ran back toward the exit, dodging laser fire as the Kelith stormed the ship. Outside, Emily waited with the scrambler, ready to cover their retreat. But as they emerged, one of the guards fired a shot that hit Sam square in the leg. He cried out, collapsing to the ground. "Leave me," Sam yelled, clutching his wound. "Get out of here." "No way," Jack said, grabbing Sam under the arm. With Maria's help, they dragged him toward the others. Behind them, the Kelith closed in, their weapons trained on the fleeing humans. "Jack, we can't make it with him," Emily shouted, terror in her voice. For a split second, Jack froze. Then, with a heavy heart, he made the hardest decision of his life. "Go," he told Maria. "Take the scrambler and get everyone out. I'll hold them off." "What? No," Maria protested, tears in her eyes. "Do it," Jack snapped. Turning to Sam, he added softly, "I'll come back for you, brother, I promise." And with that, he turned to face the advancing Caliph, gripping a stolen pistol tightly in his hand. Part 4. Jack fired the stolen pistol with steady hands, each shot aimed carefully to buy time. The Caliph advanced relentlessly, their armor deflecting most of his bullets. He knew he couldn't hold them off forever, but every second counted. Behind him, he heard the scrambler worry as Maria and the others fled, carrying Sam's weight between them. "Come on," Jack muttered under his breath, backing away slowly. His heart pounded in his chest, but he kept his focus sharp. One of the Caliph raised a weapon that glowed ominously, and Jack dove to the side just as a blast of energy scorched the ground where he'd been standing. Rolling to his feet, he fired again, hitting the Caliph square in the chest. It staggered, but didn't fall. "You're tougher than you look," Jack growled, reloading the pistol with shaking hands. Another shot rang out, this one striking the alien's helmet and cracking its visor. The Caliph stumbled, giving Jack the opening he needed to sprint toward the edge of the landing zone. He reached the shadows just as Emily and the others disappeared into the distance. They were safe for now, but Jack wasn't foolish enough to think he could outrun the Caliph forever. He spotted a narrow alleyway and ducked inside, pressing himself against the cold metal wall. His breathing was ragged, his mind racing. If they found him, it was over. Minutes passed like hours. The sounds of pursuit grew louder, then quieter, until finally, there was silence. Jack peeked out cautiously, scanning the area. No sign of the Caliph. Taking a deep breath, he slipped out of the alley and began making his way back toward the rendezvous point. When he arrived, the others were already there, huddled behind a pile of crates. Maria rushed to him, her face pale with worry. "We thought you were dead." "I'm fine," Jack said, though his voice betrayed his exhaustion. "Where's Sam?" Emily stepped forward, her expression grim. "We patched him up as best we could, but it's bad, Jack. Really bad." Jack clenched his jaw, guilt twisting in his gut. He turned to see Sam lying on the ground, his leg wrapped in makeshift bandages, soaked with blood. Sam forced a weak smile when he saw Jack. "Told you I'd slow you down." "Don't talk like that," Jack snapped, kneeling beside him. "You're gonna be fine." Sam shook his head. "No, I'm not. And you know it. Just promise me something, all right? Don't let them win." Jack swallowed hard, nodding. "I promise." They buried Sam that night under the light of the twin moons. No one spoke as they covered his body with rocks, marking the spot with a scrap of metal etched with his name. Jack stayed behind after the others left, staring at the makeshift grave. For the first time in years, he felt tears sting his eyes. "We'll make them pay," he whispered to the empty night. "Every last one of them." Part 5. The next morning, the team regrouped at a hidden cave on the outskirts of Haven 7. Morale was low, the loss of Sam weighing heavily on everyone. Jack tried to push through the grief, reminding himself why they were fighting, but even he struggled to find words of encouragement. "We can't stop now," Emily said finally, breaking the silence. Her voice was firm, though her eyes betrayed her own sorrow. "Sam gave his life for this. We owe it to him to keep going." Jack nodded, forcing himself to stand tall. "She's right. We've got a job to do. Let's figure out our next move." Maria pulled out the map they'd recovered from the Caliph ship. Spread across the table, it showed supply routes and key locations throughout the sector. One spot stood out, a research facility marked with a red X. According to Emily, it was where the Caliph conducted experiments on humans, testing new weapons and technologies. "If we hit this place, we can deal a serious blow to their operations," Emily said, pointing to the facility, "and maybe find something useful while we're at it." Daniel frowned, studying the map. "It's heavily guarded. Getting in won't be easy." "We've done impossible things before," Jack replied, determination creeping back into his tone. "We'll find a way." Over the next few days, they prepared for the mission. Maria worked tirelessly to modify their gear, adding stealth coatings to their suits and upgrading their weapons. Alex Turner, the quiet sniper who had joined them recently, scouted the area around the facility, mapping out patrol patterns and weak points in the defenses. Rachel Moore, the medic, ensured everyone was ready for the physical toll the mission would take. Finally, the day arrived. Under cover of darkness, they approached the facility, moving silently through the dense forest surrounding it. The air was thick with tension, every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves sending their hearts racing. When they reached the perimeter fence, Alex took position, his rifle trained on the guards stationed nearby. "Clear," he whispered into the comms. Maria used her tools to disable the fence, creating an opening just wide enough for them to slip through. Inside, the facility loomed like a fortress, its walls lined with cameras and turrets. Jack led the way, keeping low as they made their way to a service entrance. "Stay sharp," he murmured. "This is where it gets tricky." The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a long corridor lit by harsh fluorescent lights. They moved quickly, sticking to the shadows as alarms blared faintly in the distance. The deeper they went, the more unsettling the place became. Strange noises echoed through the hall's screams, mechanical worry, and something else Jack couldn't quite place. "This place gives me the creeps," Rachel muttered, clutching her medical kit tightly. "Focus," Jack reminded her. "We're almost there." They reached the main lab, a massive room filled with tanks and machines. Inside the tanks floated human bodies, suspended in some kind of liquid. Tubes connected them to the machines, feeding data into screens displaying incomprehensible readings. Emily froze, her hand flying to her mouth. "They're experimenting on us," she whispered, horror in her voice. "Turning us into monsters." Jack felt bile rise in his throat, but he pushed the feeling aside. "Grab anything that looks important. We're blowing this place to hell."
The news of humanity's second refusal spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Within days, every species with faster-than-light communication knew that the humans had rejected the Council again. More importantly, they knew that humans had weapons and were not afraid to use them. On the mining world of Kepler-7, a species called the Rothkari heard the news and stopped sending their monthly tribute to the Council. The Rothkari were small, furry beings who had been mining precious metals for the Council for 200 years. Their leader, an old female named Stoneclaw, called her people together. "The humans have shown us something," Stoneclaw said to the crowd of miners. "They have shown us that the Council can be told no. If they can refuse, so can we." The Council sent ships to force the Rothkari back to work. But when the ships arrived, they found human vessels already there. Captain Tony Phillips of the Exploration, Ship Horizon, had brought food, medicine, and weapons to the mining world. Tony was a young man with bright eyes and a quick smile. He had volunteered for the most dangerous job in the human fleet, making contact with species that wanted to break. "Free from the Council. The Rothkari are under human protection now," Tony told the Council ships over the radio. "Leave this system or face the consequences." The Council ships left. They were not ready for a war, not yet. But the message was clear. Humans were not just refusing to join the Council, they were actively working to break it apart. Back on Earth, Senator Nancy Baker was having the busiest month of her life. Nancy was a tough woman in her 50s who had spent years fighting for colonial rights in the Outer Rim. Now, she was head of the new Department of Galactic Affairs, and her job was to coordinate with alien species that wanted freedom from the Council. Her office was full of alien ambassadors. Some looked like animals from Earth. Others were so strange that humans needed special equipment just to communicate with them. All of them had the same question: could humans really protect them from the Council? "We cannot protect everyone," Nancy told them honestly. "We are strong, but we are not gods. What we can do is stand with you. We can share our weapons and our knowledge. We can help you defend yourselves." One of the ambassadors was a reptilian creature called Scale Bearer. Nancy recognized him from the intelligence reports Helen Carter had sent from Nexus Prime. Scale Bearer had been the first council member to openly question the system. "My people have served the council for 800 years, Scale Bearer said. "We have forgotten how to be free. Can you teach us?" Nancy nodded. "Freedom is not something you learn. It is something you choose. Every day, every moment, you have to choose to be free instead of safe. It is hard. It is dangerous. But it is worth it." Dr. Alan Ross joined the meeting. Alan was a scientist who had been studying council technology and tactics for years. He was thin and pale from spending too much time in laboratories, but his mind was sharp. "We have been analyzing the council's military structure," Alan said. "They have 12 major fleets, one controlled by each member species, but these fleets have never worked together in a real war. They have only been used to intimidate single planets or small groups of ships." He pulled up a holographic display showing the galaxy. Red dots marked council strongholds. Blue dots showed human colonies. Green dots marked species that had contacted Earth about breaking free. "The council's biggest advantage is fear," Alan continued. "For 3,000 years, no one has fought back because everyone believed the council was invincible. But fear only works if people believe in it." Scalebearer looked at the display. "You are saying the council is not as strong as they appear?" "I am saying they have never been tested," Alan replied. "They are like a bully who has never been punched in the face. They do not know how to handle real resistance." Nancy pointed to several green dots on the map. "These species are ready to declare independence as soon as the fighting starts. They have been secretly building weapons and training soldiers. They are just waiting for someone to make the first move." "And humans will make that move?" Scalebearer asked. "Humans do not have a choice," Nancy said. "The council will attack us whether we want war or not. When they do, we will be ready." On Nexus Prime, the council was in chaos. High Chancellor Mordeth had called emergency sessions every day for a week. The 12 member species could not agree on anything. Half of them wanted to attack Earth immediately. The Veltai were still angry about their ambassador being dismissed so rudely. The Hive Collective believed that humans were a virus that needed to be eliminated before it spread. The other half wanted to try negotiation one more time. The Depth Mari were afraid that a war would damage their trade networks. Protocol 7s. Calculations showed that the Council would win, but at a cost that might destroy the galactic economy. Ambassador Helen Carter watched the arguments from her place in the human section. She had been trying to leave Nexus Prime for days, but the Council would not let her go. They claimed it was for her own protection. Helen knew they were keeping her as a hostage, but Helen was not worried. She had been sending coded messages to Earth hidden inside routine diplomatic reports. She had told them everything about the Council's military plans, their political divisions, and their secret weaknesses. The biggest secret was that the Council was running out of resources. 3,000 years of expansion had stripped their homeworlds of raw materials. They needed the tribute from conquered species to survive. If even a few major species stopped paying, the entire Council economy would collapse. The humans must be stopped, Mordeth said during one heated session. "If we do not act soon, the entire galactic order will fall apart." "Maybe it should fall apart," said a new voice. Everyone turned to look at Swiftwing, the bird-like representative of the Aryan Republic. Swiftwing was young for a council member, only 50 years old. Her people had joined the council recently after a plague killed most of their population. "What did you say?" Mordeth asked. Swiftwing spread her feathered wings. "I said maybe the galactic order should fall apart. Maybe it is time for something new." The chamber erupted in angry voices. Several council members demanded that Swiftwing be removed from the session, but other voices began to speak up as well. The Aryan Republic has been thinking about the human proposal, Swiftwing continued. They offer equal partnership instead of servitude. They offer trade instead of tribute. They offer friendship instead of fear. They offer chaos, Mordeth said. Without the Council to maintain order, the galaxy will return to the Dark Ages. Species will fight each other until nothing is left. Species are already fighting, Scalebearer said quietly. They are fighting for freedom from the Council. Helen watched as the argument grew more heated. She could see that the Council was splitting apart. Some members wanted to crush the rebellion quickly. Others were starting to think that maybe the humans had a point. The session ended without any decisions being made. As the council members filed out, Helen noticed that several of them were talking quietly in small groups. Plans were being made, but not the kind of plans Mordeth wanted. That night, Helen received a secret message from Scalebearer. The reptilian ambassador wanted to meet with her in private. They met in Helen's quarters, which she assumed were being monitored by council security. My people have made a decision, Scalebearer said quietly. When the war begins, the Scarrathi Republic will declare independence from the council. Helen felt her heart racing. That is incredibly dangerous. The council will send their entire fleet against you? Maybe, Scalebearer said. But the council fleet will be busy fighting humans, and we will not be alone. Swiftwing's people are with us. So are 3 other species. He handed her a small data pad. This contains the location of secret Scarrathi military bases, ships, weapons, supplies, everything we have been hiding from the Council for decades. Give this to your military leaders. Helen took the data pad. Why are you doing this? Scalebearer looked toward the window, where stars shone in the darkness beyond the space station. Because I want my children to grow up free. Because I am tired of being afraid. Because the humans have shown us that the Council can be beaten. As Scalebearer left her quarters, Helen encrypted the data and added it to her next message to Earth. The information would show human military planners exactly where their new allies were located and what resources they could provide. The galaxy was choosing sides. Some species would stand with the Council out of fear or loyalty. Others would fight for freedom alongside the humans. But one thing was certain. The age of Council dominance was coming to an end. The only question now was, how much blood would be spilled before it was over? What will you do now? Rick asked the reptilian being. Scalebearer looked out at the stars. Learn to be free. Learn to make our own decisions. Learn to live without fear. It will not be easy, Rick warned. Nothing worthwhile ever is, Scalebearer replied. Captain Lisa Hayes became the first human ambassador to the reformed Galactic Assembly. Her job was to help write the new laws that would govern relationships between species. It was hard work, but she found it more satisfying than commanding a warship. Dr. Kate Williams established the Terran Institute for Galactic Studies on Luna Base. Students from dozens of species came to learn about cooperation, diplomacy, and peaceful conflict resolution. The curriculum was based on human history, both the failures and